'Cause like a winter tonight, I thought I would always have light. The quick flash that you gave to me, so dark I could barely see.
From wherever you are around the world, welcome and thank you for joining us. Today we're going to be exploring psychology meets the U.S. Constitution. Why is the Constitution important? We're going to find out. We have with us Steve Jackson, a retired aerospace engineer and the lecturer on the Constitution for 18 years. Not too many people know this document better than he does. Let's welcome Steve Jackson to the circle. Welcome to the circle, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Carlos.
So, first things first. Constitution. The U.S. has one. Are we the only country that has one, by any chance?
No, as a matter of fact, most countries have some form of constitution. England has a constitution, but it's an unwritten constitution. I'm not too sure how well that's worked out for them, but we're fortunate in that we have a providential constitution, and it is written.
Now, providential, you mean?
I mean that it was of God, because the founders who held a biblical worldview said so and believed that that was true.
Now, it's only a few hundred words. It was pretty easy to write up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did it take a long time for them to write it?
Well, the Constitutional Convention of 1787 met for 4 months in Philadelphia, and the fruit of that convention was the Constitution as we know it. The amendments were added shortly thereafter, a year and a half later. The first 10 amendments, at least, we know was the Bill of Rights. So it took at least 4 months of concentrated effort by very wise and very intelligent men.
And they never debated, right, on the merits of the Constitution?
Oh, my goodness. They had very heated debates. In fact, the Constitution was on the verge, the convention was on the verge of breaking up on a couple of occasions. The big arguments were over representation in Congress, large states versus small states, etc., and, of course, the issue of slavery, which was not completely resolved at that convention because it had to be resolved, at least temporarily, by a raw political compromise, and that was the best that could be hoped for at the time.
Fascinating. Let me ask you this question. I know from the being in the political world for a little while, a lot of people don't understand the difference between what a democracy is versus a republic. Can you tell us what the difference is?
Well, the differences are sometimes subtle, sometimes very glaring. But fundamentally, a democracy is literally a government of the people, where people directly study issues and make laws that affect themselves. That is a pure democracy, the government of the people. The masses rule. A republic, on the other hand, while their representatives may be voted on or elected by a majority of the people, the representatives are accountable to, in this case, we're discussing the United States Constitution. They are not subject to a simple majority will or a simple majority vote of the people. A republic is a nation of laws and not of men. A democracy is literally a government of men. A republic is a nation of established laws. And of course, the ultimate lawgiver, again, the biblical worldview of our founders, the ultimate lawgiver was God himself. And those laws, which are unchangeable and immutable, must be adhered to with a little flexibility, but the laws must be adhered to. And that's the characteristic of a republic. And one of the key differences between a republic and a democracy is that in a democracy, majority rules. Okay? So minority rights are in jeopardy. Minorities don't have any secure rights in a democracy because they can be voted away by a simple majority. Only in a republic, based upon the rule of law, do minorities have legitimate enforceable rights.
Interesting. That's a big difference.
Yeah, it's huge.
Because right now we are seeing some minorities, and we've seen it over the decades, get a lot of their rights. The handicapped, minorities and ethnicity, they're seeming to be able to get their voice heard. And it's caused some ruckus out there. Some of the laws that have been passed have not been supported by the majority, but the minority have gotten through it. Now, we were talking earlier about amendments, and I know there's a hot topic right now, the Con, as is commonly known or affectionately known. What is the Con? What is this Constitutional Convention?
Well, the Constitution in Article 5 provides 2 means by which it may be amended. The first means has been used 27 times, where 2/3 of both houses of Congress pass an amendment, and then it goes to the states for ratification, and if 3/4 of the states ratify it, it becomes part of the Constitution. Like I say, we've used that 27 times. We've never used method B. Method B is if 2/3 of the states call for a convention. Then Congress must issue a call and convene a convention. The Constitution says, for the purpose of considering amendments, plural. Now, we had one constitutional convention in 1787, and it was convened for the sole and express purpose of amending the Articles of Confederation, which was then the law of the land. Well, those guys were some of the most wise, honest persons of high character that the world has ever known, and yet they exceeded their mandate and gave us an entirely new constitution, which, by the grace of God, is man's best law. But the point is, there's no way to limit a constitutional convention. Once it's convened, those delegates hold absolute sovereignty, and nobody can tell them what they can do and cannot do. They hold absolute sovereignty. It's a very dangerous plan, and I highly recommend against an Article 5 convention.
So you can go rogue really fast. That whole convention can really go south in a hurry.
Well, the people, as Madison said at the time, those early delegates met under the most favorable of circumstances. They were able to meet in total privacy, and even the notes that they all took at the convention were not to be made public until the death of the last founder, and that was James Madison, who died several years later. The point is, any Article 5 convention that would be held today, the media would insist on being an integral part of this. You would have mass demonstrations. Imagine all the various special interest groups from all kinds of extreme positions left and right convening on one place at one time. It would be the media circus of the ages.
That would be crazy.
Really crazy. Really crazy.
And we know what happened to Sony, so I'm sure the notes would leak out. Oh, yeah. Let's go I'm going to take a step back and look at democracy and the republic for a second and take a look at it through the lens of psychology. It does affect how we view the country and kind of how we view our future if we're looking at the world through a democracy in the U.S. or through a republic. Mm-hmm. What's your opinion about that?
Well, I think one of the things you mentioned before when we were talking about democracies versus republics, you used the word right. And it's a word that we hear a lot today, people insisting on various rights. It's important to understand that words have meaning. And at the time the Constitution was drafted, a good source for the meaning of words is Noah Webster's 1828 dictionary, American Dictionary of the English Language. That is the dictionary to use if you want to capture the true and accurate meaning of words as used by the founders. And if you look up the word right as a noun, the very first definition is conformity to the will of God. If something is a right, it is in total conformity to the will of God, okay? And the Declaration of Independence boldly states that our rights, legitimate rights, come from God. It says so right in the Declaration of Independence. Today we have allowed that word to be redefined and misused. Rights today are largely wants or perhaps demands. But to be a genuine right, its source has to come from God himself. And that clears the issue and clears the air on many debates that are out there today on various rights, one way or the other. So that's an important issue and does in fact affect everybody because man is endowed with certain unalienable rights, as the Declaration says. Those are important to every single one of us, and we all need to defend those rights. The Constitution was written to organize the powers of the federal government and to limit those powers in such a way that that government would only preserve our natural rights, which come from God. And of course, current federal government has stepped way beyond those bounds and do many other things that are not enumerated in the Constitution. So our rights are really in great danger when we lose the meaning of words.
Hi, welcome to Adelante. This is Adelante Recovery, and my name is Yvette Kuglin, and I'm part of the staff.
Adelante Recovery Center has helped people in dual diagnosis for 5 years. We accept most PPO insurances and provide luxury accommodations and 24-hour support. To speak with an admissions counselor, call 1-888-242-4444. 850.
A lot of time we don't even know what's wrong with us, and sometimes we need to get away to figure that out. So if you want to go for a little retreat out in Corona Del Mar, which is a confidential location, we're here to help. So we're only a phone call away. Thank you.
Let me ask you this question, because I know this is one of the issues that are out there. There's a lot of issues in regards to the Constitution, but one of them, for instance, the NSA. Where there's a blurry line, it almost seems like, between what they should be monitoring to protect us. If somebody types in terrorist, bomb, how do I create one? We kind of want to know who he is or she. How do we clear that line up? Is there a defining line in the Constitution, or is it outdated to be able to handle a situation like technology?
Well, you're referring to the Fourth Amendment and the right of us citizens to be secure in our persons and our property, our private homes, etc. And that is a very debatable area. Where do you draw the line? And it's a subject for much Amendment 4 legislation or litigation, that occurs in our courts today. It's not a black and white, open and shut situation. So I don't have any magic silver bullet to say one way or the other.
I was hoping so.
I can say that it's questionable that the current NSA and other national level organizations are highly questionable regarding their constitutionality for existence in the first place. I can say that with a great deal of certainty, because once again, the Doctrine of Enumerated Powers, or the 10th Amendment, very clearly says that there are certain powers given over to the federal government over which they can legislate and have authority, and everything else is to remain in the hands of the states, respectively, or the people. That's the Doctrine of Enumerated Powers. And since I don't really see anything in the Constitution or any legally passed and ratified amendments about national security organizations like that, I question their constitutionality.
Interesting. It's a tough one, I know. There's a lot of those constitution issues we can't really, it's hard to define.
Tough one.
Yeah, hard to define. So continuing on the psychology aspect of the Constitution, we had a conversation off camera. You were talking about mental health and peace of mind. And it sounded like to me, when you have something that's solid, something that removes the uncertainty of the world, it gives you that peace of mind. And you said the Constitution provides that. What did you mean by that?
Well, that's a very important topic. Stability and predictability in a society are very important to our mental health and our well-being. And order is a very significant part of that. And actually, maintaining order is one of the duties of civil government, which is one of the three institutions, by the way, human institutions that were ordained by God. First the family, and then civil government, and then the church. Those three human organizations were ordained by God. And so civil government has a duty to restrain the exercise of sin and to maintain order. And maintaining order is very much relevant to what we're talking about here. So the purpose of the Constitution was to very precisely define the powers and the duties of the federal government, again, in order to keep it within the bounds of strictly protecting our God-given rights, which is the purpose of government. And by the way, that's also stated right there in the Declaration of Independence. It talks about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or the big three, life, liberty, and property, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. So the purpose of government is to secure or protect our God-given rights. Anytime government at any level exceeds that and ventures into other areas and other tasks and other powers, it's a very dangerous situation. And I know a lot of Americans today are probably stressed out over some of the provisions of, say, Obamacare that cause them to violate their deeply held religious convictions, or they're upset about excess taxation, or perhaps they're concerned about their privacy. The whole Snowden issue, blowing the whistle on the loss of privacy. We talked about the NSA before. A lot of people are pretty stressed out over that. And so I think it's important that Americans know and insist upon adherence to our United States Constitution as a means of reinstating at the federal level stability and accountability so that we can all be healthier in our stress levels. And that's maybe oversimplified, but I think there's a lot of truth to it.
No, I can definitely see that because it provides some kind of peace of mind, stability, security, like you were saying. It's not good when you don't know if somebody's listening to you on the other line or you have to pay too much money on taxes. We're going to kind of explore the Constitution in a different light now. We're going to talk about some of the characters of the Constitution. There's been a lot of controversy over the years, and I don't know if it's just for selling books or not, but there's been controversy about Thomas Jefferson, for instance. We talked about him. Is he a deist? Does he believe in God? He wrote his own Bible. He took all the miracles out. He doesn't believe in the miracles. What's going on here with TJ?
Well, Thomas Jefferson was a complex individual, certainly a very, very major character in the founding of our country. And unfortunately, Thomas Jefferson, like many of our other founders, has had his character attacked in recent times. And I think the motive really behind all of that is primarily this, that if you destroy the credibility and if you destroy the character of our founders, then you have also, at the same time, destroyed the credibility of the founding documents that they left us, the validity of those documents, the integrity of those documents, our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution. And so there's been a real effort by revisionist historians in recent times to disparage the character of Thomas Jefferson and others. Fortunately, there are authors who are attempting to counter that. I have here a copy of The Jefferson Lies by David Barton.
There you go.
And it goes through 7 lies that have been leveled against Thomas Jefferson, some by contemporaries, political adversaries in his time of life, others in recent times. But the charge that he fathered one or more children by his slave girl, Sally Hemings, is one of the lies. The fact that he was against religious education in public schools, that's another lie. This business about the Jefferson Bibles, his writing Bibles, you brought that up. He did create 2 condensed works about Jesus. The first was an abridged New Testament for the use by Indians, and the second was a compilation of Jesus' moral teachings for his own personal use. He owned a number of Bibles, and incidentally, he also owned a copy of the Quran so that he could understand the motivation behind Muslim terrorism, which was alive and well at his time, too, mainly in the Barbary area,
The pirates, that's right.
North Africa, yeah. And he was a member of the Virginia Bible Society, and he financially supported Bible printing. He supported organizations that distributed Bibles, and he insisted that the Bible be used in schools that he helped start, including the University of Virginia and Washington, D.C.'s public schools. So that's another lie that gets debunked in Barton's book. The lie that Jefferson was a racist and that he supported slavery. He owned slaves. That is true. He did not support slavery. Thomas Jefferson regularly incorporated religious acts into public settings. He called for days of prayer. He introduced religious bills in the Virginia state legislature. He signed many federal acts promoting Christian groups and activities, facilitated official churches in the U.S. Capitol, which he faithfully attended, as well as other sites. And he included that phrase, separation of church and state, in that January 1st, 1802 letter to the Danbury Baptists, only to affirm the historic understanding that the government, particularly the federal government, had no authority over religious beliefs or practices. Jefferson did not hate the clergy. That's another lie. More on that. Jefferson was not a secularist, a deist, or an atheist. Believing that God actively intervened in man's affairs, he prayed, believing that God would answer his prayers for family, country, the unity of the Christian church, and the end of slavery. While he always called himself a Christian, at the end, he became a Christian primitivist, personally disagreeing with some Orthodox church tenets while still holding fast to traditionally sound Christian doctrine. So that's kind of a quick run-through of some of the lies about Thomas Jefferson.
Very fascinating. Good book to get, The Jefferson Lies by David Barton. Last couple of questions here before we go. We just barely touched the tip of the iceberg again on the Constitution. Freemasons. We've seen this on the History Channel a lot. Freemasons, the founding fathers. We know George Washington wore the apron. What's going on here?
Well, Freemasons are another interesting controversial topic that people love to take sides on. And once again, I think this is an issue which needs clarification. And once again, David Barton to the rescue. He's written a book, The Question of Freemasonry and the Founding Fathers, and I think he does the best job that I've seen so far of setting the record straight on all of that. And in summary, in the era of George Washington, who was a member of the Masons, in our founding era, any organization tends to reflect the character and the beliefs of its membership. And if you look at the persons like George Washington. And if you understand what his character was really all about, and persons of his character, they were the ones who were involved in Masonry at the time. So clearly, that organization at that time and in that place reflected the ideals and the beliefs of them. Now, in other times and other places, it's different. So again, complex topic, but Barton does a great job of straightening it all out. So check out the book.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you so much, Mr. Jackson, again, for being on the show. Where do we get more information about the Constitution? Because I would think you guys, as well as me, need to learn more about it.
Well, one of the best sources is to use the Institute on the Constitution, which is available if you go online to theamericanview.com, theamericanview.com. The national headquarters for the Institute on the Constitution in Pasadena, Maryland, has courses available. Persons like myself, who are volunteer instructors, teach that course locally. They have record of the times and places for all those classes that are coming up. Also, Hillsdale College offers a couple of courses on the Constitution free of charge, another excellent source. Both of those teach the Constitution from a biblical worldview, which was the worldview of the founders. Also, the National Center for Constitutional Studies is another good organization that you can learn about the real founders' Constitution.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mr. Jackson, for joining us. Thank you for joining us. Remember, our motto is simple. Wherever there's psychology involved, even in the Constitution, we are there. We the people. See you guys next time. And also catch our web TV show, Circle of Insight, on therapycable.com.